Well, Wesley, I'm really grateful for just a few minutes that you've been able to give us, give our church. I've been blessed by your writing of Washed and Waiting, Spiritual Friendship, and even more recently, the Lord's Supper book. And we pass your books around so our people know your writing, but maybe don't know you very much. And so I'd love for you to feel like you can maybe speak into our community in that way. We have a more hidden life in COVID, and so we're trying to press into intimacy with Jesus, and so there's a contrast between the performative and intimate life with Christ. And I'd love just to hear from you personally, just where along the way in your own life, in your own story, did you go from knowing about God and Christ to intimacy with him, life with him?
Well, I should first say thanks for doing this. Thanks for talking with me. It's a real joy to do that. I have followed your ministry for a long time, John. I still think fondly of that time we randomly bumped into each other in a hotel
Dallas.
lobby in Dallas. Got to meet each other in person. That was great fun. So I feel connected to your church in certain ways, and it's a privilege to be talking with you in this way. Yeah, gosh, what a weird time we're in, with this, like you say, so much of our life is now private and hidden in a way that we haven't really experienced it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that you guys are pressing into, what does an intimate prayer life with God look like during this time? What would it look like to deepen your spiritual life during this time? I think those are exactly the questions that I'm asking too. My journey, I think in many ways starts in high school. I was raised in a godly Christian family, and my parents, from as young an age as I can remember, read me stories from the Bible. We had this set of rhyming, illustrated children's Bible stories called the Arch books. Some of you may know those.
Yeah.
I still think they're great. I read them to my godchildren, actually. They're published by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, Concordia Press. But those are literally my earliest childhood memories, or of hearing those stories read to me by my parents. But I think it was really in high school that I became aware that life with God isn't just something that I participate with my parents in, but I'm invited into my own experience of prayer, my own experience of pursuing God. And I had a youth pastor who was, at the time, he was single. He was in his late 30s. He was very adventurous. He would take a lot of us on camping trips. He taught me how to go spelunking with other members of the youth group. So we did a lot of fun things, but I would say he had a kind of unusual hunger for intimacy with God, intimacy with Jesus. And he had a spiritual practice himself of memorizing large portions of scripture. So not just, a verse here and there, but he would memorize a chapter and sort of pray that to himself throughout the day. And I vividly remember one time being on a skiing trip with him in Colorado and some of the other youth group, and we were riding the chairlift, up to go skiing on the mountain, and just asking him about his prayer life, and saying, I know that I love Jesus, I know that I love reading the Bible, but I don't really know what it looks like to kind of cultivate a prayer life. And so we started talking about that. From there, I found my way into some spiritual writing by people like Henry Nouwen and others. So not just theological writing, but spiritual writing, about what does it look like to talk to God in prayer. So that was really the start of it for me. And I look back on, that youth pastor, and I just think it's so important to have a model. It's not just about principles, it's not just about ideas, but to have someone you can look to and say, this is someone who seems to know something about intimacy with God that I don't know yet. And I want to kind of apprentice myself to him. So I think of that as kind of the start of it in many ways.
It's interesting. We've done a few of these interviews, and I don't know exactly what I was expecting with that. Hey, what's your story about experiencing the intimacy with Jesus? It's rarely been this book I read
Hmm.
or just some spiritual insight or some sermon, which is terribly disappointing for pastors. But it's oftentimes been either some terrible or discouraging suffering or experience, or watching someone else do it.
Hmm.
And I think it's just a remarkable that a deep life with Christ really comes through circumstances or examples or life with other people. Um, I gave the story of my dad, who just really kind of taught me how to repent by
Hmm.
sitting next to me at night oftentimes and asking for my forgiveness, which is, I didn't think about that until I started having kids of my own and how hard that was.
Right.
And just that example is there, but just that, oh, I need to do this, but man, this is a lot harder than I thought
Right.
it was.
Right. But to have someone model that for you, that was
Yeah.
what drew you to think you needed it.
Yeah. And even, desire that I want to be doing that. You mentioned Now and a few others. And we just said that it hasn't always been books that have taught us how to be intimate, but what are some things that have maybe instructed you along the way that maybe stabilized some practices in your life?
Yeah. So I graduated from high school and I went to Wheaton College for my undergrad, which is for those who may not know, it's a Christian college just outside Chicago. And I remember, for the first time kind of living on my own. I mean, I had a roommate, but I was living apart from the house that I'd grown up in, apart from my family.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, I'm going to need to develop some habits, of spiritual formation, of prayer, Bible reading. And so I initially started pretty ambitious. I started with Robert Murray McShane's Bible reading plan, which has you reading, 5 to 6 chapters of the Bible a day, and I was faithful with that, through college. It was very formative for me. I wore out a couple of New American Standard Bibles during those years, but I mean, this is a long story. I don't have to get into this, but I ended up moving to the UK for grad school, and I discovered the Anglican tradition while I was there, and I joined the Church of England. And I think since then, the Book of Common Prayer has become kind of an anchor for me. For those who don't know it, there's different electronic ways to access it. Maybe you can even include some of those in the newsletter or something. But for me, that's what I do now in terms of my devotional practice. And there's so many things I like about it. One of the things I love about it is it gets you into different parts of the Bible every single day. So you're always reading at least one psalm. You're always reading from the Old Testament, and then you're reading a portion of the New Testament as well. And you're also, so much of the language of the prayer book is drawn from the Psalms, and so you're getting kind of saturated with the language of the Bible, and you're using it not just to inform your intellect, but you're using it as like a way of returning prayer to God. You're taking God's own word and you're responding back to Him with it. So that's been super stabilizing and surprisingly easy to use. I mean, I think a lot of people might feel a bit intimidated by the prayer book, but it literally takes about 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, with evening prayer. And man, it's just so rich. And, I think all of us go through times where we really don't feel like we have the words to pray. And the prayer book kind of gives you those words to lean on.
We used to have an office. We used to have an office downtown on 14th Street, and there was a Anglican church or an Episcopal church right around the corner, and they would have a service, a Book of Common Prayer, a prayer service in the mornings. And I would go to use that time to pray, but in a side chapel, I wouldn't participate in the service. But for a long season of about end of 2014, 2015 or so, I had a long season of depression. And like you said, it just didn't have words. And so I would enter into that side chapel alone and just feeling empty. I didn't have words to pray. And so I joined the prayer service. It was just me and three elderly women every day for
Yeah, I love that.
for a long season, and it just sustained me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I knew the pastor; he was a good brother, and so it was just good to be ministered to in that season and given words to say.
Yep.
You've already kind of answered this question, but I wonder if you could just speak to it directly. There's many folks who maybe when they think about spiritual or intimacy with Christ, maturity, that it sounds like the mature side of spiritual elitism. They'll have 5 or 6 people that they'll come to mind and like, that's who they're talking to. It's not for me. And, or maybe they've had a lot of starts and stops in a prayer life and they could be discouraged and just feel there's something prohibitive of them. And I just wonder what encouragement would you give them? What kind of practical steps for those of us who maybe have a hard time just getting started and staying?
Yeah. You know, the thing that comes to mind immediately is a sermon written by one of my favorite writers, a Catholic priest who's now passed away, named Herbert McCabe. He was an Irish Dominican. And he has this sermon on prayer, and he says a lot of us, and as soon as I read this, I felt diagnosed, you know, I felt seen. But he says a lot of us feel like we need to have the right topics for our prayer time. You know, we need to have a really holy or ambitious kind of godly topic that we're bringing to God, and ultimately, you know, that's more about us than about God. You know, it's more about us feeling like we can kind of get ourselves ready. But McCabe says, you know, whatever you're most occupied with in that moment, whatever you're most worried about, and it could be something as petty as, you know, what am I going to eat for breakfast? You know, whatever is kind of dominating your thoughts, take that to God. You know, start with that. And if you find that you're praying and you're getting distracted by this thing, make that thing the topic that you're engaging with God about. And I remember reading that not actually that long ago and feeling super liberated by that. You know, just and McCabe says it's not that we don't mature in our prayer life, we do, but we're never going to mature if we don't start with where we are. You know, if we don't start with what our current burdens are, our current frustrations are, and learn to talk to God about those things. And I'll see if I can dig up that quotation, because it might be something you'd want to share with your people. It's really quite encouraging. So
we do a midday prayer, and we were just going through Psalm 130 today, or whenever this was recorded.
Yeah.
And it starts with, I cry to you out of the depths.
Yes.
And it doesn't say, I pulled myself out of the depths, climbed into the heavens, made myself worthy, and then I begin to talk to you. It's out of where I am, out of my depths, out of my emotional stoop, and just feeling wherever I am. And I found that just hugely freeing, just to, you know, we're in the middle of COVID. A lot of people are sad and discouraged, and just being like, all right, I can't be discouraged and talk with God, or I can't be depressed and talk with God. I can't be angry.
Right.
But no, out of the depths.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
hugely encouraging. What was the name of that sermon? Do you remember?
I can't remember the name. I'll dig it up. The preacher was Herbert McCabe.
Yeah. Well, for many of us, we're wondering, just intimacy feels hard, feels weird to talk about intimacy with God. Maybe even in our culture, where intimacy can kind of mean any number of things. Right. How would you define intimacy, or maybe even just your own experience? How have you experienced intimacy?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. You know, I mean, to be totally frank with you, I remember a few years ago I was reading Stanley Hauerwas's memoir, and he says in the intro to that book, he says, God has never just been there for me. I don't think he means he doubts the existence of God. I think what he means is there's never been like this overwhelming kind of felt experience of God's presence. And I think I don't know that I'd put it quite that way, but I think I'm similar to that. I'm not a very charismatic person. I can't point to any kind of, dramatic spiritual experiences that I've had with God. But I think
no glory tabernacle moments.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, again, just, the regularity of praying the Psalms and looking to Jesus. I mean, praying the Lord's Prayer every day, twice a day, and just coming back to the central truth. I mean, I just wrote this little book on the Lord's Prayer that you mentioned, and the overarching idea of that book, which I think is the overarching idea of the Lord's Prayer in the New Testament, is that we as believers are invited to share in the intimacy that Jesus enjoys with God the Father. So Jesus is the eternally pre-existent Son. He's never had a moment of disconnect from God the Father. And meanwhile, we don't have that. We're born in sin. We're born disconnected from God. We're born in rebellion against God. But the fact that Jesus takes us into the eternal relationship of intimacy that he enjoys, and that's true regardless of whether we feel that or not, regardless of whether we can point to some dramatic religious experience we've had. I mean, God says that to us every Sunday when we hear his word again and again. You are my child. You're my adopted child. That's your identity. That's who you are. For me, that's really the basis of everything. So I can come in the morning and say, you know what? I regret everything about yesterday. I didn't get, half the things done I wanted to. I yelled at my friends. I was petty. I was spiteful. And yet here I am again this morning, and the word is the same word that I hear every single morning, which is I'm now invited to pray our Father, with Jesus, to say our Father. I mean, that's the basis of it for me, I think.
Yeah. Isn't it encouraging? I mean, you hear those moments where people have this real rich, thick, deep, intimate experiences with Christ. It kind of takes them to a higher plane. And it stirs your longings. You long for those moments, you pray for those moments, but it's also deeply encouraging to know that whether you experience or not, whether you have the taste of the third heaven or not, there's just some ordinary things that you can have. And it reminds me of a letter that C.S. Lewis wrote in one of his letters to children, where someone's taking, the Eucharist for the first time, and he talks to the child about experiences. You may not experience anything, and that you don't need to worry. It's not yours to. It's God's to give, but what is true is whether you feel it or not, what's supposed to happen is happening.
Right.
And I think that's just true for prayer too. Whether you feel the glory tabernacle or not, what's supposed to happen is happening. And I do think there is a kind of lightening of our hearts and strengthening of our souls as we continue to pray in those intimate moments, and like a good conversation with a friend would do to us anyways.
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful for your time, Wesley. A lot of wisdom and care for us. You pastored us really well in these few moments, so I'm really appreciative of you. We'll encourage people to read the Lord's Prayer book. I'm really grateful for that. It's real short. We love that book, and so I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you, John. It's a privilege, and God bless you guys. You're in my prayers, and hopefully I'll get to visit in person sometime.
Thanks, brother.